Boom. Scott Absher, CEO of ShiftPixy. And of course, these guys have taken they've taken a page from the gig economy. They've not only addressed the restaurant staffing shortage that was happening during COVID, but they've created this third-party delivery and most importantly, the ghost kitchens. And without further ado, I'm going to bring him up. Scott, how are you, sir? Good to see you.
Hey, Sully. Good afternoon.
He's back in Miami.
Look at him.
Oh, I see. Just a reminder. You realize that we've been underwater here. I was telling somebody the other day.
I know.
It never rains in California, so as the song says. And we've had roughly a month worth of rain.
Yes.
And we are like, I'm not paying California taxes to live in Seattle, pal. All right? That's how I feel about this.
But the drought's over.
The drought. Yeah, well, if we could only save the water.
Exactly.
Scott, we have never talked, maybe one time a while ago, about your technology play on this. We always talk about the ghost kitchens. We talk about, taking a page from the gig economy and addressing the restaurant staffing shortage, and also, the ghost kitchens sort of changed the face of all of those delivery services, which, by the way, didn't exist 5 years ago, right?
Right.
But the technology piece of this thing is very important, especially when it comes down to ShiftPixy. Talk about that a bit.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I was looking at, read a remark from Bernie Marcus, one of the co-founders of Home Depot, and his comment was that people were lazy and didn't want to work, and I think it's not exactly the case. Part of what's happening now is the balance of power is really tilted toward labor, especially in the hourly labor markets. And probably the most fundamental disconnect right now between brick and mortar and this new workforce is you're not reaching them where they are. And that's the investment that we made in technology that meets people where they are. And by that, I'm talking about their mobile device. People live there. They're habituated to that. There's now behavioral science behind even how some apps work. People know that if you're going to reach today's workforce, you need to reach them there. And that's really what our technology was designed to do. There's about 4 different points of interdiction that we track, that we have data on, that we do research on, and that we test to. And the way it showed up for us, Sully, is we have probably one of the fastest recruiting mechanisms that move people through a process to get them on the job site very quickly, but all through this mobilized technology. And that really is the future of this game.
What's interesting is we think in terms of this sort of as transitory employment, but it's not for some people, correct? I mean,
right.
You've got to consider this as a real part of our GDP now, correct?
It is. There's people that just like part-time work. They like to be a little bit nomadic, move from this opportunity to this one. And the percentages are rising every year. And you're watching also, especially with Gen Z, people there, they look at work differently. They may have a subsidized lifestyle, maybe they live with their parents, but on the work side of things, they want to do things that matter to them. And whether it's fun, whether it's engagement with coworkers, the workplace has really changed for them. But however, the modern workforce hasn't adapted to them, and that's really what ShiftPixy's technology was designed to do, to recreate those connections between this new workforce and brick and mortar. But it takes some education on the brick and mortar side, I will tell you.
Scott Absher, of course, is the CEO of a company called ShiftPixy. They are publicly traded under the stock symbol PIXY, and you can go to shiftpixy.com. I want you to take us through your opinion, Scott, because you and I started talking towards, I'm going to say, the middle of COVID, and you were addressing restaurant staffing shortages. Now you're just addressing restaurant staffing and other staffing. As a top-down, just as a country, are we in a better place than we were pre-COVID? Has COVID changed us to a point that's making us be in a better place in regards to that subject? Or are we still, climbing up the same mountains that we were prior to COVID in keeping these folks employed and of course, making sure they're fairly paid?
I think we're definitely in a better place than they were, in the midst of COVID. People that want to work are getting back to work. Subsidies that were a disincentive for people going back to work have kind of drained out of the economy at this point. So, and you can tell by the labor numbers, things are looking pretty good. I would say where you're going to see some of the biggest shift is probably in some white collar areas, such as you can see technology companies laying off. They ramped up. They probably overpaid for some of the staffing that they did, and now they're kind of paring that back. But I think blue-collar labor, from our vantage point, and that's the market that we track to, we're seeing really healthy signs there, and we don't see diminution of wages, and we don't see diminution of opportunity.
Hey, listen, before we push off to next week here, because I'd do a whole show with you every time if I could steal that much time from you. Talk about your brands. We got some brands coming out that you guys are spending a lot of time on. I want to spend just a little bit of time on that before you get out of here today.
Yeah, we've got about a portfolio of 12 brands that we're curating that we're getting ready to launch, and we're working on the infrastructure side right now, which is the kitchen fulfillment. We talked a little bit about that ghost kitchen environment that we'll use for fulfillment. But we're also going to pair these brands with social media influencers. You'll see our alliances line up with people that are in esports and that are in very strong population social media influencers. So each one of those brands will have collectives of those. And we're hoping here to start getting some of that work done in this first quarter of this year. So
Scott
a lot
Absher,
of work, a lot of money.
Scott Absher for president, ShiftPixy, PIXY. Hey, Scott, thanks so much. We'll see you next week on the air. All right, much more to come. Big Biz Show. BigBizShow.com. Stand by. Costa and I'll be back in just 1 second.